I want to first talk about some of our sponsors. We've had a lot of venture capital and angel investors come to fund UVEF so that every event's free, the food's free, everything for the entrepreneurs is free when you come to UVEF. It's paid for by the sponsors and the board, so you can just come and have a good time. So Epic Ventures is a platinum partner, and Peak Ventures, we want to thank those guys for everything they've done to sponsor and make this all possible. I want to thank Mike and Foxtel. All of this food has been provided by Mike and Foxtel. So thanks, Mike. I want to talk a little bit about UVEF. We have three things we really want to accomplish. One is connecting entrepreneurs to capital. So if you look at our board, all our board members are usually, they're either angel investors or managing partners of VC firms. All of them invest in startups. So when you come to the events, look for board members with their tags on. They're all investors and they're people that you want to be talking to. So that was kind of one of the big changes we made with the board recently. The next thing is we're going to have these fireside chats every month and really provide great education for entrepreneurs. Then the last thing I want to hit on, and this is a big one, is we try to do whatever we can to recognize entrepreneurs. So if you go to UVEF.com, you will see that on the site there are a couple contests going on right now. We want to honor the top 100 entrepreneurs in the state, so please submit for that. And the second thing is the top 100 most buzzed about startups. That's not by revenue, but by buzz. And we've hired a startup here in Utah that's going to measure that buzz and social media impact. So that'll be exciting. Get on there. Everybody should get involved in that. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else I need to cover. Oh, so submissions are due by December 1st for that. Okay, so we've got a couple studs up here. So Austin is the CEO of Brasswire that was just funded by Peak. Max he's done some pretty incredible stuff with contributorships. He's a phenomenal writer, and there'll be some exciting things we'll talk to him about. And then Mike is the CEO of Foxtel Marketing, contributor for Fast Company and Entrepreneur.com. So with all that said, we're going to dive right in. I picked these three because I think they have exciting stories to tell all of us. And there's some really cool things that they've been able to accomplish early in their careers. So I first want to talk to Max. So Max did something I thought was really, really unique. He reached out to a TechCrunch writer and told him that he would edit his stuff for free. And I think he did that every week for a year and a half?
Yeah, about a year.
So about a year. So tell us about that. Just your journey from, saying I want to be a writer in these major publications and actually getting there.
Yeah, so there was a TechCrunch writer named Nir Eyal, and in particular, I reached out to Nir because he wrote about a lot of habit-forming technology. I'm really interested in habit, behavior change technology. And at the time, Nir was kind of just getting started as well, but he had already contributed he'd been the CEO of a couple companies, and he had started contributing to TechCrunch on a weekly basis. And he was actually looking to improve his writing, and I thought, well, I didn't have the expertise to be the writer, but I had the background in writing and et cetera to help him improve his writing. And so I reached out to Nir, and for about a year and a half, and even to this day, Nir sends me stuff to have me read it, critique it, give him feedback right before he sends it to TechCrunch. And I think for me, that was kind of a learning experience on multiple levels. Number one, I got familiar with the quality of writing that needed to go into something on TechCrunch, kind of the thought process, the organization, and then also it was just a lot of, it gave me a lot of confidence because I could see, well, he's writing this and I can write this kind of stuff. And he's considers my feedback valuable when I offer it to him. And so from that point, it was kind of really easy for me to say, okay, well, what are the topics I'm interested in? How can I model his process and do it myself?
So I first have to just say, amazing hustle. Nice job. That's exciting that you're able to pull that off. You also told me about some group out of Norway contacting you to fly you out to speak. How did that happen?
Yeah, so there's, like I mentioned before, I do a lot of writing about behavior change technology. technology that helps people form habits. And one of the publications that I've written for is the nextweb.com. They're a tech publication, an online tech publication. And I think they're actually based out of London, and so they have a large international readership, particularly in Europe. And I had written a couple pieces close together that were about how you can form habits, some of the major obstacles that are facing tech companies in the space of behavior change technology. And there was just an email out of the blue. There's a tech conference in Norway. It's called the Next Media Conference. It's a big tech company that's hosting this conference, and they said, we want you to speak on behavior change technology. And it surprised me a little bit because I haven't been getting tons of those offers, but at the same time, I don't know that there are a lot of other people that are writing the same type of articles that I'm writing, and so it seemed like a natural fit. And so I'm actually flying out there next week to go speak on behavior change technology in Norway.
So Max, how many years has it been since you graduated from college?
I graduated in 2011.
So already an expert, and what publications are you writing in?
The most common ones I write for the Next Web. I've written for the Fast Company, Huffington Post. I syndicate some stuff with Business Insider. There are a couple other ones as well, but those are kind of the key places.
So I want to talk to you, Austin. I think you told me an interesting story about your one approach that didn't go so well and how you kept at it and what you learned about how to pitch a publication like TechCrunch.
Yeah, so for GrassWire, our first press came kind of by accident. I was actually living in my Honda Civic in Silicon Valley, kind of trying to get a startup off the ground.
I mean, awesome story, right? He's living in his car.
So yeah, it wasn't hard to get press for that. Then when we actually had product up and we had investors, we wanted to get on TechCrunch, which is like, it didn't matter as much as I thought it would, or as much as you think it would when you're like 16 and you're like, man, TechCrunch. But regardless, it's kind of like a rite of passage of starting a company to be TechCrunch. So before that, I reached out to a Pando Daily writer and said, hey, here's what we're doing. And so they ended up writing about us. And so I took that email, I copied it and pasted and changed all the details and sent it over to this TechCrunch writer who writes really specifically in our space. And I really loved this guy's writing style. I was super excited. And then I got an email back that was like, what are you talking about? I don't write for Pando. And I realized that I'd forgotten to switch out the publication name. So I emailed this guy that works for TechCrunch, like, hey, I love your writing on Pando Daily. And so he obviously didn't write about us or care to think about us again. So I just found another writer and emailed them, and they ended up writing about us, and it all worked out. But yeah, it's important to email the right people.
So it seems like there's two keys there in what you said, though. You did enough research to know specifically who was writing about your space. And then two, are the writers at TechCrunch talking to each other? Because it sure doesn't sound like it.
I think, so TechCrunch is a big enough organization. I have no idea how many people they have, but assume it's hundreds, like maybe 1,000. One writer isn't talking to every other writer about every press pitch that they turn down. That being said, it's really, really important to target. So I don't come from necessarily a writing background. I haven't really contributed anywhere, but we get tons of PR, more PR than we could ever care to have, honestly. And it's just really important to find and target the right people. If I emailed someone at TechCrunch that writes about behavior change technology, they're not going to care about what we're doing. But if we find the social journalism, the kind of the heavy journalism people, because that's what our company does, then it usually ends up working out. So the first thing is you have to target, I guess, really specific writers who write specifically about what you do. Then the second thing is that if the first person turns you down at a big organization like TechCrunch, just go down the list and email the next person, and they'll never know. So,
yeah, I think that's great information. Tell me about timing. If I'm a startup, when do I do it? When do I reach out, and is there times when it doesn't make sense to get that kind of PR?
Yeah, so kind of a learning experience for us in getting PR is realizing that a lot of places you only really get it once. Or you have to have something justifiable for them to write about you again. For a lot of startups, that's a funding event, but we had kind of the blessing and the curse that every tech blog ever wanted to write about us before we'd even launched. So there came a point when it was like, I had to be like, okay, we're not letting anybody else write about us. I'm not taking any more interviews. We're focusing solely on product, because sending 100,000 more people to our landing page wasn't going to do any difference.
With contributing and getting, the thought leadership thing, whatever that is, it's a process, and it takes a long time, and it is just rife with failures all the way along the path. And it's similar to, starting up a company, really. You got to start doing all the, for a startup, I think the titles of CEO and CTO and CFO, and you need them, but they're kind of silly, because what are you really a chief executive of? You and one other guy, or you by yourself? You're doing everything, right? With writing and getting certain contributorships, you got to do a lot of the little stuff, the crap to get to another place, because these publications, they want to see, what have you done? And in your pitch, they oftentimes want to hear, well, where have you been published, or what else? Give me a list of your greatest hits for your pieces. And if you don't have anything, or you just link to your blog or your Facebook page, it's not going to really, I almost used a crude term, impress them. Come on. This used to be Utah Valley Entrepreneurial Forum. But so you got to build up a base before you think you can just, go and do something. You got to have a name. They're going to want to ask the question, who are you? What have you done? That type of stuff. So it takes a while. And then how has it impacted? It's been great. Surprisingly, certain publications do a lot more for you than other ones. Some of the biggest ones actually, our message doesn't really resonate very well with small businesses. So my entrepreneur column doesn't do a lot for us in terms of business development or anything like that. However, when I write on VentureBeat, a lot of SaaS companies, read VentureBeat, and that's huge for us, because our message is really geared towards tech companies. So when I write on VentureBeat, we always get stuff from it. We get a lot of people just reaching out, asking questions, different things like that. What is funny, and one side effect, so it doesn't help with hiring or anything like that, but people start believing that you're a journalist. So I start getting pitched as if I was a journalist, and I totally understand why journalists hate being pitched now, because I will literally have a PR person pitch me, some of the really tenacious ones, 7-8 times in a week, over and over and over again. And even after you've said no, they think that, well, if I package it differently, he'll say yes this time. So that's been an interesting side effect, but it's also been really good for, social proof. A lot of companies, when you are a startup and you are trying to provide services to larger groups, they're going to want to know, who are you? Can I trust you? Can you handle us? All this type of stuff, or those questions. And when you can tag a larger brand onto your website, it works really, really well for that social proof. A lot of people say, featured in. Releasing a press release that gets picked up on Yahoo page 6, or the CNBC affiliate or the NBC affiliate, then you put up NBC News on your website because you were featured in there because they picked up your press release. It's different, and people kind of have noticed that. Whereas when you can put up your featured in, and then when they click on it, it takes them to a story written about you or written by you or one of those. So it helps a lot for that, a ton.
So when you had nothing that you'd written, how did you get your first contributorship? So I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm thinking this would be a good thing.
Yeah. Writing for the crappiest, auto-approved websites out there. Because again, you have to set the base. You also have to understand what you're going up against out there. So as someone who wants to get into thought leadership, or someone who wants to run a column, or someone who wants to get published on one of these big sites, there's this thing running around there, and anybody who's in SEO or knows digital marketing will know this, that a year or two ago, guest blogging was huge. Everybody wanted to do guest blogging because a lot of these media sites who don't have huge budgets needed content. The way to get that content is to get free content from people who are willing to write it. What do they do in exchange? Well, they'll give you a link. Links are gold in SEO and blah, 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 blah. And then it just got devalued like crazy. But, which is good, because a year ago, editors and journalists and websites were being inundated by the most just garbage content you've ever seen. Stuff spun out of Bangladesh, broken English, being submitted to Forbes to be published. I mean, it was asinine. I have had editors send me stuff, forward stuff onto me and say, Mike, look what I just got pitched. And literally broken English, doesn't make any sense. Dearest sir, I would be so honored if you would, feature this on your blog. And it was to, Fast Company. I'm like, wow, your blog. You really haven't made it yet. But so that was a challenge. And then, around summertime, guest blogging got, devalued a little bit earlier than that. But anyways, it was a good thing for people who are doing it for the right reasons, for the thought leadership, for driving traffic to build their brand. So it has died down. Mostly just really bad spammers are doing that. But since it's died down, it's become easier again. So if you've tried it previously, the reason I bring all that up is that if you previously tried to get published and you were turned down, know that you were probably just getting drowned out by thousands of really crappy spammy voices out there, and it's worth another effort, okay? So I started on, sites that I knew I would see like 3 views, and it was me, my wife, and my mom. Like literally, that's the views that we got. And you know what? But it was published, and you got your headshot, and you got your bio on there, and you write for those for a while. And the reason you do that is because you have to show that consistency, because if you want to get a contributorship, which actually isn't a word, by Microsoft Word standards, it's always, misspelled. But anyways, if you want a contributorship, a lot of people will want to see consistency. You just nailed one at Forbes, and you got to hit it weekly, right? So you got to be consistent with it. And if you can show that consistency with a site that doesn't matter, that puts money in the bank for the editors. And they're going to look at that and give you credit for it and say, you know what, this guy sticks to his guns. And when he says he's going to write weekly, he'll write weekly because he did it for 2, 3, 4 months for this one site. And there's still some of those small sites that I became really good friends with the editors. I still publish on there. Whenever we have something that I just put some thoughts up, I'll throw it over. And a lot of them syndicate us now, because if I don't have the time to do it and I'm publishing on our blog, they'll just pick it up and syndicate it from the blog, which is also great too. So start small. I mean, literally start small with these really small blogs, get them on there, and then move your way up the chain. And there is a pecking order to these websites, and you can kind of guess. Type in their URL into Alexa, find out what their traffic numbers are. The higher the traffic numbers, the better chance that their editor has a God complex. And when you get really, really high, you'll start realizing like, hey, this guy doesn't respond to my emails. This guy, he's kind of an ass, and it's because they have 40 million viewers per, week or whatever. But when you can get there, it pays off. When you get, scale that mountain.
Thanks, Mike. Yvonne, do you have the mic? And let's go ahead and open up questions. Any questions you guys have for this group, go ahead and shoot, raise your hand, and Yvonne will hand you the mic.
I have a question to Austin, if he can just share about experience being in Silicon Valley in the car and doing what he was doing, and how he came to the VC folks, and because I was reading the article that.
So you want to know more about his personal story from his car to the venture capital?
Right.
Okay. Did everybody hear me? He wants to know more about Austin's story of how he went from his Honda car to getting a round of funding.
Yeah, so it was, if you read press about GrassWire, it's a little bit more sexy than reality really was. Basically, so we launched this early version of GrassWire, and we got like 17,000 users in our first couple days. Like, it totally blew up. So GrassWire is a little bit of background. It's a real-time newsroom that's curated and fact-checked by everyone. So we pull in all the content from the different social media channels, we kind of analyze it, we display the best stuff, and then we let people curate and fact-check it from there. So when a big event happened, the first example was the Boston Marathon bombing. That was the day we launched. Obviously, it was interesting to see what the thousands of people in the Boston area were taking pictures of and taking video of and talking about and that type of thing. So it was like, okay, we're taking off. I need to get to Silicon Valley and raise money. I don't have very much money in my bank account, but whatever, we just need to get it done. So I moved out there with my co-founder. He lived in the cheapest hovel you could find in Redwood City for like $1,000 a month for like a tiny bedroom, because that's what it's like in Silicon Valley. Then I just lived in my car, showered at the YMCA, worked out of a co-working space. I actually got a discount membership at the YMCA for being under the poverty line, so that was pretty sweet. And then, so the story that kind of gets told is like, and then all of a sudden we raised a round of funding and the product took off, but in between then and me living in the car and when we actually raised funding, it was about a year of me just kind of trying to figure things out. My co-founder and I parted ways, and so we ended up joining Boom Startup and going through that accelerator, and then we raised money at the end of Boom Startup about a year later. So there was a lot of difficult times in between those 2 points. But
Thanks for telling the real story.
And real quick, so it was getting me thinking, when Austin previously mentioned this, kind of a tangent, sorry, but Austin had mentioned when he was telling his story that timing for your press is very important. He's very right, and there's a lot of startups in the room or people that are trying to get press right now. There's a ton of different types of press that you can get. So we've helped friends of ours, referrals, different things like that. It's not our core competency, we don't do PR, but we've helped people get coverage for certain things. And we've noticed that we've gotten them front page TechCrunch, doesn't really do much all the time. It's not a surefire grand slam. So don't moonshot these types of things and say that's gonna be the golden ticket for my company. We've also gotten people like exclusives on VentureBeat and Fast Company and Forbes and these types of things. Again, doesn't move the needle as much as you would think. And then just like random stuff that you wouldn't suspect, but a mid-tier blog, a mid-tier site, you guys are mentioning, Pando and the Next Web, The Verge, these ones, they're up and coming. They're still that tier below Mashable and those ones. Not a coverage story, not an exclusive, literally just a small snippet and a link. And for some reason it goes viral, and that thing drives 20, 30, 40,000 people to your site, whereas the front page of TechCrunch drove 1,500 to 2,000, because that front page turns fast. They have a lot of content coming out. So when he was saying there's different timing, he's right. There's different timing, but there's also different types of press, so get creative when you're reaching out to people. If you guys have been reaching out to people and saying, I've got the quintessential entrepreneurial story, which he does, I don't, and I'll never be that kind of entrepreneur, and I'm okay with that. I mean, living in your car, dude, that's awesome. I would never do that at all. I enjoy like TV too much. But there's if you think you have that story that's just gonna drive you to riches and fame, if you could just get people to believe in you and hear you, a lot of times you're probably wrong. I hate to break it to you, but you're not a diamond in the rough, and you're not a beautiful snowflake. There's a lot of other companies just like you that are pitching these journalists just as much as you are, if not more consistently, and they're gonna drown you out. And a lot of them actually have, $1 million in funding and have hired a PR firm to do it for them, so they're out pitching you like 100 to 1, right? But you get creative and you say, hey, I noticed you wrote a Gadgets for Father's Day last year to a CNN writer or a CNBC writer, or someone who did a quirky little stupid, listicle that just drove the needle. But those things do really well, mind you. I noticed you wrote one last year. If you're gonna be writing one this year, we have a gadget that's perfect for dads. I wanted you to see it. And also, if you're the founder of the company that's doing the reach out, it means about 100 times more to them than if you were having a PR agency do it for you. Like I said, a lot of editors and journalists, I don't know how to say it nicely, but anyways, they're very difficult people to work with a lot of times, very much so. And they become jaded, and they've suckled at the teat of cynicism, if you will, for so long, that they brush a lot of people off. So even though your pitch is awesome, just know it's not you. They're getting pitched by 1,000 different people at that exact moment. So think outside the box. Don't come with the next pitch. Don't, hey, we're the Uber of this, because I guarantee you they've already heard that 20 times that day. But look for someone who's written something that you want to be in and go from this side.
So what if I'm a really aggressive entrepreneur and I'm trying to get covered and I've sent the emails? How can I amp it up? Can I mail something? Can I show up at the door? What can I do to get that?
So I don't know. I have a little bit. So I think what he's saying is completely correct, and I almost take the reverse approach. Like I don't email cupcakes to somebody I want to write about. I send them a one-liner and keep it super simple, and just like.
So what was your pitch?
So
What did you say?
So my pitch to, for example, TechCrunch was, hey, I'm Austin Allred. I'm the co-founder of GrassWire. We're a real-time newsroom that's curated and fact-checked by everyone. This is important because there's all sorts of misinformation floating around on social media, which is where a lot of people get our news. We give people a way to find the good content, and then the big thing is I said, and here's example 1, 2, 3, thanks. That was it, one paragraph. But example 1, 2, 3 were, hey, this huge media organization called Al Arabiya out of the Middle East was publishing this story that was verifiably false, and nobody figured out about it. But the GrassWire users found out that they were using pictures from the Philippines in 2003 or whatever. And then another one was, hey, it was this tweet that got like 10,000 retweets, and it was supposedly a Palestinian family breaking their Ramadan fast next to their house, which was destroyed by Israel. But the house was actually like in, I think it was Thailand from a typhoon like 4 years ago. So we just pointed out how GrassWire solves this really big problem. And I feel like more than anything, the angle is the most important thing if you're pitching a TechCrunch writer or Panda Daily or something. Because there's tons of people that are, you want them to write about you, but you have to give them a really good reason to. And if you have a story that they know, hey, if I publish that, then people are gonna comment on this. So for example, San Francisco Magazine wrote an article about me when I was living in, south of San Francisco. And the writer, Farhad Manjoo, he writes for Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. So he wrote, he used me as like an example to spin this story of like, everybody's dying to get to Silicon Valley no matter what, and they're living in their car to get there. And so that fit perfectly into this thing that he was trying to sell. So if you can kind of work your way into something that they want to say, it's a no-brainer. And that was awesome because then SF Weekly, which is like the magazine that's like, oh, Silicon Valley isn't that great, we need to keep San Francisco a community. They wrote like a counterpoint article about me and how I'm not really the quintessential entrepreneur and I'm just this dreamer. And then everybody else started chiming in about whether or not I'm a good entrepreneur, whether or not I'm an idiot. And we just got tons of press. It was awesome. So just work your way into a story that's worthy of being told.
To go along with that, if you are looking for press or to write for places, have a thick skin, like right off the bat, because I can't tell you how many times I've written something and like the first person to comment and I rush to it because someone's commented on my post and it's, you suck. It's just understand that there are people on the internet that all their job is to do is make other people as miserable as them. And it's, if you live and die on other people's comments, you will die on there's a lot of, it's tough. You gotta have a thick skin.
Okay, so back to my question. You're basically saying don't get aggressive for the press. Is that what you're saying, Austin? Let it come to you. Because I've heard of entrepreneurs saying I walked in and I was able to get them to cover my story because I just flew there and hoped I could get in front of somebody instead of just sending an email like everybody else.
Sure. There are a million different ways that you can do it, and it's up to your own unique style. I kind of look at it as like, this is kind of weird, especially since I see my wife right here. But there's like, when you're dating, everybody kind of has like this imaginary, like whether you're better than somebody or not, but nobody really knows that until you express it. So if you express that like, hey, like, I don't really need you to write about me, but if you want to write about me, here it is. Sometimes that might factor in a little bit, but it's all relative, and there are a million different ways you can go about it. So, okay.
You think about it, Harrison Ford was picked up because he was a carpenter on like one of George Lucas's films. He wasn't trying, and then he became the biggest movie star. And then you got other stars that grind their butts, till they're 70 years old on little mini stages and doing, Cialis commercials, and then they finally get a big hit.
Cialis.
And it's, there's some that fall into it, and there's some that have to grind for it. And I think both of them can succeed very easily.
So what side of is Austin on?
So Austin was a grinder.
Cialis or the grinder?
Don't let him fool you. He wrote a book. You guys should read it. I saw it on Twitter today. He wrote a book on how to pitch. A guide.
I wrote a blog post that's probably 4,000 or 5,000 words long on how to get press. It's on my blog. If you go to austinallred.com. It's called The Hacker's Guide to Getting Press. So that actually came from my experience mostly from working at a marketing company where that was my thing. I would send 2,000 emails a day for various companies and get them featured in Time and Wall Street Journal and New York Times. But that was all I learned how to do that after GrassWire type of thing. And then GrassWire got funded, so it all came full circle and it all worked out.
It's a good one too. I mean, I've read it. So, we're in the age of Twitter. 4,000 words is a book. But some practical stuff, I guess, real quick that some people might want to know, and Austin has hit on this quite a bit. Don't email the catch-alls of these news sites to get covered. No one checks it. It's a slough pile. You have, and you mentioned this in your guide, and it's true. There are hierarchies to individuals, to these journalists at these media outlets. The ones that have tenure and that have been there for a while, Lexitos, those types of things, they can write about whatever they want. They put out one article a month because they've proven it. And then there's the ones that have to hit quota that have to repurpose press releases 10 a day and get these things out. And maybe you'll be able to, if you think about it, there's a term in publishing called the slush pile, where it's everything that gets sent unsolicited gets thrown on there, and if anybody's super desperate, they'll go to it and look at it. And I think you hear every once in a while, like Stephanie Meyer came off of the slush pile, which should never have happened. But with the slush pile at these publishing places, it won't get looked at. So find the journalist's personal email. Don't pester them. Don't email them 3 times a day. A couple emails, couple follow-ups just to make sure until you get a yes or no is perfect. Don't hit the bulk emails. A lot of people are saying, oh, you gotta interact with them on social media. Nothing looks more fake than someone trying to interact with you on social media. If just out of the blue you start following like Alex Wilhelm and you're like, LOL, that's hilarious, Alex. He's gonna, he's a really brash journalist. He's told me to curse word off a couple times. But what I'm saying is, if you try and force that social media interaction because we're going to become friends and then he's going to follow us, it's actually, they've polled journalists. I think it was overwhelming. It was like 95% of them prefer to be pitched by email because it's on their terms when they want to. You're not clogging up their social media feed. So even though you've heard someone that it was in a blog one time that you should totally pitch people via social media, just find their personal, not their personal, but you can even find their personal email a lot of times.
I think that's actually really important to, like you're saying, there are PR agencies that are pitching, or you're sending mass emails to thousands of people a day and you're whatever. You have to differentiate yourself from that. So if you can interact in some really personal way, if it's meaningful, and sometimes that means, I would go to a writer's about.me page and send them a message through that, which ends up in their email inbox, but they know that that's not just me firing off a list of spam. Although everything has its strategies, right? But so the more personal and real you make it, the more it's like, hey, you're really this guy that I really wanted to email. I'm not just sending this out to 100,000 people. That works 100 times better, unless you forget to swap out the publication.
I think one comment that I've been wanting to make too is that whether you're trying to write for a publication or you're trying to get them to write about you, one of the ways that you can do that is go out and find the best post on a particular topic that you're interested in, and then just mimic that use the same layout that they use examples similar to what they did and make it better than what they did, and then you know that you have a high quality to publish with somebody. Mm-hmm. Same goes for getting written about. Is that if you have a really high quality idea, even Austin, when he barely had a product, had this really great idea that was really exciting, and so the high quality idea itself was enough to get published about.
Oh, and sorry. So when Austin was saying that he doesn't know how they interact at certain ones, a lot of these big media places, they actually use a content collaboration tool so that they're not rewriting the same stories or talking about it. One guy's writing about Apple's earnings and the other guy's writing about Apple's earnings in the exact same stream. They get assignments, but they also get to see what is being written about by the other journalists at these places. And the reason that's important is journalists will sometimes write about you without ever responding to you, which, you know, you pitch them and then out of the blue the next day the dude wrote about you or the lady did and they never said they were going to write about you. Don't be too eager to email like 5 people at the exact same time at the same publication, because that will burn bridges for you. Because if 2 of them decide to pick you up and one of them goes to write and the other one sees that they're already writing, they're going to know that you pitch more than one. It actually turns them off quite a bit and they'll kill the story all the way across. I've seen that happen quite a bit too.
Wait until they say no first.
Yes. Wait for the no, or in 3 or 4 days is a good waiting time. Stuff like that. Don't ever BCC everybody. Don't load them into MailChimp. Don't ever open to whom it may concern. I mean, there's all these things that are basic you would think, but that I've personally received as a journalist when I'm not one, but I've seen people do this to me, so I know it happens to like the legit journalists quite a bit. So just don't do that.
In fact, just the fact that people are emailing him says to him that they're not reading up on him
Exactly.
and know what he does and who he is.
Yep.
I mean, because I've gotten similar pitches, and I'm always like, well, did you even look at me on Twitter? I'm not a writer. I work for a tech company, and so knowing who they are and what they do makes a big difference.
And what Max was saying, quality counts. He's totally right. I mean, Max, I can guarantee if he was editing for TechCrunch, dude could write circles around me. I went to high school in Georgia, literally. I came out not knowing the difference between your and there and there. I really did not. That happened like when I was 21. But I had a 3.8 average, so you're aware. But the quality is always going to trump anything else. And writing's like anything else, any other skill. The more you do it, the better you get. So just write. I mean, if you want to be a writer, not even a writer, but if you want to be a contributor, you want to be someone that's people follow and do these types of things, write when you don't feel like it, write when you do feel like it, but just always be writing, write stuff that you're never going to publish. Just write. One of my dirty closet secrets is that I wrote a novel once that will never see the light of day. Guys, it had dragons in it. So it's like never going to see the light of day. 120,000 words, full on length novel. And I will never do anything with it. And it took up 6 months of my life. But it was an accomplishment, first off, to finish it. I was so proud of myself. But not only that, from start to finish, I was such a better writer by the end. I mean, I look, even just in that one piece of work over a 6-month period, I would look back and I thought I was written by a kindergartner at the beginning. You will get better and better and better, and the better you get, the easier the stuff gets. You get picked up more, you get pitched, your pitches get, you write so much faster. You can bust out 10,000 words in an hour and a half or 2-hour sitting. It gets a lot easier.
Wow. Okay, let's take the last question from the audience.
Kind of hit on this, but just a couple questions. You talked about like trying to get something written about you. When you do that, how much of your story do you want to share? You mentioned pretty quick. And then it's like, what's a key thing to like tell them? And then 2, if you've been written about, do you want to share that with them? And that you've been like kind of featured, or just I've had this article written about me? Those 2 questions.
Yeah, so the first question, remind me what it was again.
How much do you include about?
How much do you include? So my strategy is kind of make them contact me to get a little bit more information. So I give them like a couple really juicy details, like, hey, I've been living in my car. I actually never pitched that to anybody because I didn't have to, which kind of answers your second question. But hey, we're this really cool company. We just raised $650,000. We do this. Here's some examples, like call me. Or email me or whatever. And then you let them like make the next interaction, make that really easy, leave that barrier really, really low. I've seen some people that they'll go through and they'll put together like a 10-page overview of their company with all their photos, all this stuff. And they'll send, like, that's good to have, but you send that after like they're in the like, okay, I'm going to write about you stage, I need content. If you send that before, then it's like, okay, they'll look through it and they won't really care. So you're basically baiting the hook, right? So whatever's the sexiest, most interesting thing that you can write about yourself or your company, it's a little bit different. So I was talking to one guy that he was trying to get press, and I was like, so what does your company do? He's like, well, I've been emailing all these people trying to get press, and yeah, we're a social media marketing company, so we manage like your Twitter account, your Facebook account. I was like, so what do you email these reporters? He's like, well, I email them and say, hey, we're a social media marketing company. We manage your Twitter and your Facebook accounts. I was like, that is the most boring article that you could possibly write would be about somebody who manages somebody else's Twitter accounts. So we helped them come back with a strategy of like, here's exactly these dark pools where you can buy Twitter retweets and follows, and how kind of the dark side of Twitter and the black market of Twitter, how that works, and that got picked up everywhere. So the second question, remind me, I have a really short memory.
Do you let, like when you reach out to these people, do you let them know that you've been?
You let them know. Yeah, so to a certain extent, you absolutely do. So the reason the first article about me was ever written is I responded to this Quora post that was like, would it be reasonable to be homeless as a way to fund your startup? And so I was like, yeah, it totally was, and it worked out kind of. So a big long response to that. Then the next day I had, Slate publish something, and then the next week I had calls from BBC and The Guardian and Next Web and Fast Company. And so everybody was like, that seed of the story was there, and it was like, oh, well I know that's an interesting story. I can see how it's taking off. So I can just kind of cling on to that and kind of borrow some of the content and reword it, and you're done. But that maxes out at a certain point. Like a Mashable editor emailed me right after we raised money, and he was like, hey, tell me about your startup. And so I, sent him back the pitch, and we had a call, and then he emailed me back, and he's like, I just looked you guys up, and you've had like 10 articles written about you in the last week. Like, this is a little saturated. Like, calm down for a minute, and then, next time you have a launch, next time you have anything interesting worth telling, like, we'll write about that. And so I need to email that guy back eventually. But so that there's definitely social proof of like, hey, it's interesting enough to be written about in TechCrunch and Pando Daily. Like, it's obviously interesting enough to be written about on the totallyawesomentrepreneur.com that has 15 readers. Then there's also the strategy of if you're doing a big launch, you can kind of set, I can't even remember what the word is, but you say like, you can't write about us before such and such a date. And I think doing that really implies like, hey, we know what we're doing. This is a real product launch. Like Embargo, that's the word, thank you. So we've actually just started doing that with our next product launch, which will be in a couple weeks.
Okay, thanks everybody. We appreciate it. Hopefully everything that was talked about here is really valuable, and we got to the meat of how to get press for your startup. Shauna, who was the food truck that brought in all the food?
Fabulous job. This is Cravings Bistro, and today at the last